Okay, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, ahi ahi. Welcome to this, I think it's our 7th function this year. It's a very auspicious one because it's a debate. And it's a great debate. And the subject, of course, is that the baby boomers have stolen our future. Looking at the audience, I can see a few of the baby boomers here. I am a predecessor of the baby boomers and look back on them with a great deal of disfavour. I'd like to thank 2 or 3 people to start with. First of all, Devonport Chocolates, because they have come to the aid with lovely presents for the participants. Secondly, I'd love to acknowledge our local newspaper Flagstaff. They did a lovely story on David and his daughter. Actually gave the impression they were nice people. And that's something that, we really value in Devonport. But having our own newspaper, having our own chocolate producers, we're indeed very, very lucky. I'd like to just mention our future events coming up. On the 25th of September, we've got C.K. Stead here with his latest collection of poems. The chair of that will be our own, if you like, Poet Laureate of Devonport, Kevin Ireland. So that should be a special occasion. The following month, on the 23rd of October, quite a change of pace. We have Mika's biography, The Fabulous Revolution, and his book has been not launched. It's launched a week or 2 earlier, but it's entitled I Have Loved Me a Man, and it says it all. So Mika, a very well-known, very professional and a very great Maori entertainer, will be here for our October event. Our last event of the year in November is where Devonport women, eminent Devonport women, whatever that means, look back and reflect on where perhaps they've come since suffrage way back in 1893. So I just mentioned that to you. I draw your attention to our website. We record all these events. The excellent Morgan over there does a fabulous job of recording them all. And if you look at our website, Devonport Library Associates, and look at it there, you can look at any of the programs that we've made over the past year. And now to the great debate. Before I introduce our antagonists, if I can call him that, I'd just like to acknowledge our timekeeper, Frank Graveson over here, and just to indicate that each speaker will have 8 minutes to speak. There will be a warning bell, or Frank, if you could give the warning bell at 7 minutes, and at 8 minutes, the old school bell will toll for thee. Right, now where am I up to? Oh, yes. Right. Now, let me just introduce the teams. David's had an interesting time with his team. He needs no introduction, of course. David is a local, he's a writer, he's a columnist, he's a father, he's a speechwriter himself, and he has put together and enjoys a huge amount of the credit for tonight. He leads his team, and I'm introducing the negative first. The second speaker has changed over the course of the last week or 2. And the second speaker is someone very special. Barbara Cuthbert, where are you, Barbara? Right behind me. A local, well-known. She's not on her bike tonight. She's defending the baby boomers, and I'm sure she will do that. She's an ex-member of this association on the executive. So a special welcome to Barbara. Our third speaker, of course, is Simon Wilson. And I've enjoyed the fact that we now are getting some really vital, I think, reporting on Auckland issues. I don't think Simon's wearing a little pouch with the scalp of Don Brash in his belt, but he had a great debate there. He's back tonight in Devonport tonight. And Simon, a person of your eminence in journalism, is something that we feel very privileged to have you here.
What about a round of applause for them?
Yes. And now the negative. The negative, of course, are young. They're unforgivable. They're all under the age of 30. That is disgusting. And I look out over this audience. They're a real threat to Devonport Library Associates, people like us. And I'd just like to say that we don't know as much about them. They don't have a track record, and maybe that's an advantage. First of all, Mary-Margaret, the leader. I was going to describe her as a dutiful daughter, but I won't. And she is a debater of note. And she's a local, and we love to have you here, Mary-Margaret, so a special welcome. Our second speaker is Leah, here. And our third speaker is Laura. And Laura has a very... And collectively, I describe them as the BFM girls, but I don't know whether that's an insult or not. Now, I'd just like to reflect about them. I haven't told you a lot about them, and I'd just like to reflect. Are they, in fact, the three graces? The three graces. Do they represent wisdom? Do they represent grace? And Mary-Margaret has confessed that's one of her names. Okay, or do they represent fertility? The classic qualities of the three graces. Something to reflect on. Or on the other hand, do they reflect the Furies? Are they the three Furies of mythology? The three Furies of mythology were here to address crime and avenge crime. They particularly had the brief of avenging family crime. And last but not least, they had the brief of attending for the gods the crime of humanity, hubris, the overreaching of our ego. Are they here, in fact, tonight to destroy, in fact, what previous generations have done? We'll soon find out. Please acclaim Mary-Margaret, who's going to open the debate.
Can everyone hear me like this? Great. To show that the baby boomers have ruined our future, I only need to say two words this evening. Donald Trump. Make that three words. President Donald Trump. Throughout the 21st century, most of us have known how much still needs fixing. We're all aware that there is still a long way to go on so many different fronts, whether it's racism, sexism, or poverty. But where are we going now? Backwards. The baby boomers ruined our future because they left us with so much to fix, but let the solutions slip further and further away. Let's start with affordability. In New Zealand, boomers got their jobs because of free tertiary education from the comprehensive welfare state that they were born into. Later, they pulled that ladder right up from behind them, and now, as university students, I am in debt, Leah is in debt, and Laura is in debt. Despite this, boomers go on and on about how millennials and beneficiaries don't work hard enough, while simultaneously arguing that Labour should not be making the first year of university free. Just to spell this paradox out to you all, to go to university in this economic climate, you do have to work hard. And anyone who you perceive to not be working hard cannot go to university because of how unattainable it is. Leah, for example, is a mother and a master's student with a full-time job who is on the board for Women's Refuge. Laura works for no pay as the assistant news director at our radio station, while she studies and supports several members of her family. None of us will ever buy a house in Auckland, but I don't actually want to do that. The nuclear dream is, for the most part, false, and using it as a method for how we approach first-time home buying is an outdated and homogenous way of thinking. My father will tell you that the housing crisis is simply a supply issue. But I put to you that rethinking the way that we need to format housing needs to change. I would put a lot of money on the bet that if we started using te tiriti o Waitangi as an approach to aiding the housing crisis, necessary cultural shifts may occur. Similarly, on that note, the longer that we go on neglecting te tiriti, the more entrenched our divisions become. And boomers single-handedly bred the widespread ignorance that treaty issues are too old to matter. Boomers complain about homeless people being such a problem here, yet they vote for the party whose fine economic management caused homelessness to surge. They complain about our poor excuse for public transport, yet they complain even more about the enactment of a petrol tax designed to fix that very problem. And they beat their chest to dribble about how millennials are all on their phones, even though none of us tweets as much as my dad does. My main point tonight about how the baby boomers have ruined our future centres around neoliberalism. Neoliberalism that boomers invented. Now, I want to be clear because some boomers might think that I'm living up to my edgy young person stereotype who yells stuff used to the system, whatever that may be. But I want to be clear here that I do not wish to conflate capitalism and neoliberalism. Simply, I do not see how anything except mass privatisation and laissez-faire economics could have made New Zealand life so individualistic, full of pressure, and downright lonely. It should not be so hard to secure help for your health. It should not be so hard to buy food. And it should not be so hard to afford shelter. Because what do you get when it becomes this hard? An epidemic of mental illness. But what do we also have because of privatisation? A total dearth of resources dedicated to mental health. Furthermore, climate change has only been accelerated by market freedom and hands-off governance. Globally, economists have been saying for years now that economic policy cannot go on this way because of the vast number of detrimental impacts caused by a lack of the distribution of wealth. However, 46% of us were still happy to vote national last year. When I say us, electorates with a high proportion of older voters have a positive correlation with voting for the National Party, while ones with younger voters have a negative correlation. Therefore, the baby boomers have ruined our future by continuing to support hands-off governance that fails so many in this country. Baby boomers have ruined our future because they took it from us. Thank you.
Well, they've opened their case. Let's hear from David.
Good evening. It was the 24th of April 1989 when it was 3 o'clock on the 24th of April 1989 where I presented myself in the office of the Deputy Prime Minister. Would you like me to start again leaning right in? Here we go. Oh, I see. Here's the problem. I'm just going to grab this. It was the 24th of April 1989 at 3 o'clock when I presented myself at the office of the Deputy Prime Minister for a job interview. And the first person who greeted me was a young woman in a blonde bob and a blue dress, and she was sophisticated and she was cool. And she was possibly the most impressive person I had ever met, and, well...
Put a ring on it.
I put a ring on it. The interview was to be the speechwriter for the man who was 3 months away from being the Prime Minister, though none of us knew it then. What we did all know was that in the previous 5 years, everything had changed. On the 14th of July 1984, baby boomers took over from Robert Muldoon. They took over the Prime Minister's office, they took over the cabinet, and they installed everything that the free market thinking suggested was going to liberate us all. And for the next 4 or 5 years, it was a freewheeling farrago. Everything got exposed to the free market. And on the 14th of July 1984, I was a young executive for Dominion Breweries, a Brierley company, already being exposed to market forces. And over the next 4 years, I was paying more attention to being an executive than the fine detail of policies. And all I knew really was that it was user pays for everything. So, on the 20th of May 1987, when I had a heart attack, you see what I did there with the sympathy flash? I went into the hospital and I thought, well, I know what's going to happen here. I'm going to have a huge bill when I come out at the end of this, because it's market forces, right? And it was a great surprise to me to come out 3 weeks later understanding that my life was in tatters, but I did not have a large bill, and perhaps this wasn't quite as bad as it might be. Anyway, two or so years go by and I change everything about my life, and I find myself applying for a job to be the speechwriter for the Minister of Justice. And on the 24th of April 1989, at 3 o'clock, I turn up at the Beehive to meet the Deputy Prime Minister, and here is this woman in a blue dress with a blonde bob, and she really is the most sophisticated person I've ever met. And it turns out that I have the job, and I'm pretty excited about this. And I find that I have joined the revolution just in time to see the whole thing implode. And it is a miserable and wretched experience for the next year and a half, as the woman in the blue dress and blonde bob, who turns out to be the Chief Press Secretary for the Prime Minister, as I am appointed to be the speechwriter for the Prime Minister, and we realise we have our fingerprints all over the crime that has been committed by the baby boomer generation. Here is what has happened to New Zealand: the welfare state, the whole notion of cradle to grave support, the whole notion of looking after individuals, all thrown to the wind. And we've helped. And it's not a nice thing to realise you're a part of that. But you also realise that what happened with these baby boomers was that they thought they were doing one thing, and a whole raft of other things happened instead. There was so much regret. There was so much doubt. There was so much uncertainty, except for Roger Douglas and Richard Preble. They had no doubt at all, and they just cast ahead with absolute certitude for the next 10 and 20 and 30 years. And this is kind of the whirlwind we have reaped, that you have a certain certitude amongst certain people that the free market was absolutely right and there was no mistake about any of this. And you have other people like, for example, Geoffrey Palmer, myself, and the woman in the blue dress and the blonde bob, who is Mary-Margaret's mother, who cannot be with us tonight. And many of you here know her tonight as Karen Beanland, the smarter of the two of us in this relationship. And I salute her, and I wish she were here, because she would have possibly made a better argument than I can for the proposition that the baby boomers actually had the best of intentions when we went into all of that farrago, and God, look at what it turned into. What a disappointment, what a travesty, what a tragedy. And yet, have the baby boomers stolen the future of the people who followed? Because without the woman in the blue dress and the blonde bob, Mary-Margaret would have no future. Where are we? Here is where we are. This is where we are. We have a baby boomer proposition that produced a free market revolution, and it grinds on, and sorry everyone, it's our fault. We nearly stole our future, but Mary-Margaret, you only have a future because I fell in love with your mother in the blue dress on the April the 24th, 1989. And secondly, on October 19th, 2017, Jacinda Ardern, aged 39, and Winston Peters, aged 139, found common cause, and I believe the sun is coming out on your future. This is my hope, that at a certain point we recognise the folly of what the boomers thought they were doing. we saw, and I do want to digress now for a moment, and just take you all back to those years of Robert Muldoon and a kind of a thuggish tyranny of thought, of control, and a notion that nobody would be, that he would be gainsaid in no way at all. And so, of course, a following generation embraced the possibilities and went nuts. And what happened? What happened is this. A whole generation heard the bell toll
1 minute. It's for them.
on a prior generation and imagined they had a better idea. And there was a certain naivety to it, and there was, as ever, a greed and a simplistic notion that money comes for nothing, and it all went into property. And property, which I have to say is what sustains our wonderful local newspaper, is nonetheless the paradox that lies at the heart of this entire debate. We have houses that are unaffordable for young people, and whatever else we talk about tonight, this is our fundamental problem. We need to reset the whole damn thing, and I laud the proposition that on the 19th of October 2017, Jacinda Ardern, aged 39, and Winston Peters, aged 139, found common cause because KiwiBuild, if it's given the chance, may be our last and only chance to change the whole setting of property as a proposition in New Zealand. Let us get ourselves out of this drug-addicted cycle of money for nothing for property and give our kids a chance.
Well, who's next? Leah. Please welcome Leah.
Okay. Oh, yes, I'm very short. I actually put this argument together on the way here, which is really lovely. Okay. Thank you. Rogernomics, poverty, housing. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I don't really know that much about Rogernomics. But
He didn't either.
I'm not going to bluff about that one. So I guess the definition of the baby boomer generation is sort of take from a millennial's point of view. I'm an older millennial, I guess. I'm 30. I only just turned 30 this year. But I'd like to think I've achieved a little bit. They have this idea that millennials don't really buy houses. And I, in fact, bought my first house, well, my only house, in my last year of university. Yeah, but thanks to my dad, who is a baby boomer. So he scrounged the deposit and he did everything, and we did the negotiations with the lawyers, and I'd never be able to do that again because that was very stressful. And that the outset of owning a home is glamorized in the media. You know, owning a home isn't. I'm very lucky to own a home, and I accept that people need to settle in New Zealand and in Auckland and that kind of thing. Oh, there's a whole different group of people over here. And home ownership isn't for everyone. And the fact that we romanticize it as being this place where we just sit. And I would have loved to do travel and do all that kind of stuff, but I've had to do up my house and spend way too much money and all that kind of stuff. But fortunately, I'm very lucky to do that, and it's been hard work. But it's still the crappiest bungalow on the block. It's a 1-bedroom. It's got a little granny flat on the back, which is growing mould, which I need to knock over at some point. And I've brought up my son, who is 5 now, and we lived in this 1-bedroom room thing with my ex-partner, and we brought him up in that situation. And my ex-partner's gone on to earn twice as much as me with no tertiary qualifications, which is lovely. It's really lovely. So I guess getting back to the point, a brief abstract of my argument is if you don't look after us, we will not know how to look after you. We've got an ageing population, that's the fact. We can't afford to have children. And I'm not saying that fertility is a thing that we do. It's not our destiny, but some of us do want to have more children. So we can't afford it. But a lot of us millennials, we go into aged care. And again, it's like, if you don't look after us, we can't look after you. Twice as many children now live below the poverty line than they did in 1984. Which I believe, yeah, isn't that? So more than likely, millennials are parenting these children in these poverty conditions. But we're lazy, entitled, unhygienic, lazy, like avocados, snowflakey, lazy, smelly, fluffy, liberal, aren't we? Yes, we are. Millennials, however, are responsible for some of the world's most prominent technological advancements. Facebook, Twitter. Yes, but where would we be without Justin Bieber, Jennifer Lawrence and Mark Zuckerberg? Baby boomers would have nothing to complain about. On a more serious note, we're largely responsible for the evolution of the hospitality industry and a lot of technological industries as well. There's been I study public relations as part of my master's, and a lot of the, not just European country sexualization of consumerism is owed to a lot of the baby boomers, as they look at consumerism as, again, a be-all and end-all of somebody's existence. And it's not tied up with empathy, it's just tied up with profit. And that's quite heartbreaking for me, and I'm going off on a tangent. We're selfless as a whole, millennials. We're not lazy. We live in our mouldy houses. We want consumerism as a band-aid for our rising diagnoses of mental health. And we're a generation largely defined by empathy and humility, and we're pretty sick of it now. Harden up, they say. We would if we could. Baby boomer entitlement is not reserved for Anglo nations either. My baby boomer mother, she often brags about her family house in the provinces of the Philippines, where they had servants and tailors. She calls me lazy too, and why don't I make the most out of my life by also having a tailor and a servant? My dad bought his first house in Paihia and in Wellington, and both of them, one of them was bought for $12,000 and the other one was bought for $20,000. And he supported my two brothers as a solo dad in the early 70s by being a drummer in a covers band which played in pubs in the Bay of Islands. I think that's the end of my argument, really, but because I wrote it on the way here, which is great. Baby boomers are a bit like, why can't you have more empathy? And why do you have to look at us as like, generalizations tend to not go too well. I work very hard. I'm still very, very broke. And as a person of colour, it tends to be a little bit harder for me as well, because people notice that I'm not completely Kiwi, but when they hear me talk, they're like, oh, she's from New Zealand, okay. So I guess what I have to say is, yes, you ruined it for us, but thank you for giving me the deposit for my house.
Okay, I'm getting confused sometimes about who's on what side. But let's hear from Simon. We'll know what side he's on.
Now, how's that? Is that good enough? You can hear me? Okay, so I should apologise. I thought I was going to be late here this evening because I ran to catch the ferry, and just as I got there, I was like 5 seconds too late, and I stood there on the gangplank calling out, "Hey, I'm a baby boomer!" Some bloody millennial kid just, raised the gangway and off they went. It doesn't always work. I am here to tell you the truth about baby boomers, because mostly we talk in euphemisms. Mostly baby boomers pretend that we're nice people, pretend that we haven't got it all going our own way. The truth is, we are not only nice, not so nice. We are the greatest generation. Now, the proof of this came just last week when we discovered that for many years now, the #1 selling album in the world has been Michael Jackson's Thriller. Michael Jackson is not a boomer. That album was overtaken just this week by this one. It is the Eagles, and it's not just any old Eagles album. It is the Eagles' greatest hits. We invented good music. We invented these. We invented these. Okay. Come on, who'd like to dance with me? You like to dance with me? No! You know we invented dancing too, don't you? Seriously. Who doesn't like baby boomers? We invented all of that. We invented music. We actually invented all the best music. Just going to turn this off for a moment now. We might get back to it. We invented all the best music. Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. Who remembers Dancing in the Dark? The Boss. We invented dancing. I said that, didn't I? And you look at the millennials' music. Doof, doof, doof. Doof, 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 doof. How crap is that? Or, on the other side, Taylor Swift. Now, I want to tell you, if you know, as I'm sure you all do, the Beatles' White Album, I know the words to every song on the Beatles' White Album, all the words to every song. I could not tell you the words to a single Taylor Swift song if my life depended on it. Proof of the superiority of baby boomer music. We had the Rolling Stones, the Velvet Underground, all the best music. Joan Baez, the Beatles, Jefferson Airplane, White Rabbit, the best song about drugs ever. We invented drugs. And I tell you what, our drugs were better than your drugs. Your drugs make people addicts. Our drugs gave us Woodstock and flower power. They were safe drugs. Well, except for Janice and Jimmy, Jim Morrison, Brian Jones. But hey, you can't make an omelette if you don't break a few eggs. We invented silly sayings. We invented cars. Now the cool cars, I don't mean the old jalopies. We invented cool cars, great to ride in. We invented bicycles. Whoa! And I mean here, real bikes ridden by people wearing Lycra. Who doesn't love a mammal? You've heard the saying, boat, batch, beamer. What's wrong with that? It only means the best times anyone could ever have in their lives. We invented the suburbs. We invented backyard cricket and barbecues and SUVs and suburban neurosis and feminism. Now, I mean proper feminism. And I'm very happy to... We invented proper feminism, and I'm very happy to explain it to you all.
We need a man.
We invented movies. That's the modern movies, of course. Quentin Tarantino was the invention of the modern movies. He was a boomer. John Travolta was a boomer. Samuel L. Jackson is a boomer. We invented the word boom, by the way. Boom! We invented heckling. We invented free speech. Obviously, we invented debating. This is a library. We invented books. I bet you everybody in this room, the last book you read was probably written by a boomer. We invented libraries. Look at the building itself. We obviously invented architecture. You heard before about the wisdom and grace and fertility. That's us, all of us. Each one of us is all of those. We are also the Furies. We are all myths. We are hubris. We are anti-hubris, and we invented hummus. I tell you, it gets better. We invented sex. No, I mean proper sex, without pornography. Gotcha there. We invented hippie, free love, and Playboy. We invented everything, basically. We invented travel. Before us, there were only sailboats. Basically, if you wanted to go overseas from this country, you had to row your way there. We invented aeroplanes. We invented retirement. And why do we do this? It's because we deserve it. We're that good. We own everything. We are the mightiest generation ever. We will live longer than anyone ever has before. We are richer. We are having more fun. We are the only people who know how to drive manual cars. We are the only people with the nerve to shout stuff used to the system. We actually did that. We did everything. And you know, if they were any good, they'd come and wrench it from our cold, dead hands. I want to read you a quote. I found this on Twitter today. Reading the news these days makes one wonder how humanity has drifted into this darkness. Evil is dominating, good is disappearing. Growing up an optimist is becoming increasingly difficult for young people. An emotional ice age of frozen hearts and souls. How can we change it? That was written by the patron saint of millennials, Kim.com. And I tell you, that's it in a nutshell, because that is the problem of being a millennial. Boomers never had that problem. Right. I just think it's probably appropriate at this moment to go here. Now, thank you. What's ruining everything? What's ruining everything today? Well, it's Twitter, and Facebook.
The Herald.
I know, it's Twitter and Facebook. It's like we're all having a barbecue on the beach, and they just had to invent social media. It's like we're living in Lord of the Flies, but virtually. Except instead of an island, it's Twitter and Facebook. There are no adults, and our terrible instincts have swamped our better ones. We didn't do that. You did it. It's like we're Ralph, they're Jack, and they shouldn't blame us. We're just here for the beer and the steaks.
Well, after such a modest speech on behalf of the baby boomers, let's welcome Laura.
I just want to thank Simon for that brilliant stand-up comedy. It was really So I also wanted to start today with a quote, and it's from Life magazine. It goes, "To make a living could have absolutely no meaning to these children of the affluent society." This was from 1968 in reference to the baby boomers. This reflects a sentiment that we're dealing with every single day in terms of millennials being entitled. Every single generation has critiqued the last for being entitled. In fact, it goes all the way back to 700 BC. Hesiod, who was the first Greek economist, said the younger generation did not respect their elders. Now I'm going to pull back the focus to what's really important here. Have the baby boomers stolen our future? And that, of course, as has been mentioned before, is best summarized in the housing crisis. So the United Nations says that everyone has the right to own property, but this isn't true that we are all, you can't hear? Sorry, I will lean in.
Move that mic just a little closer to you.
Thank you.
There we are.
Okay. The United Nations says that everyone has the right to own property, but that's not true that everyone has the same opportunity to own property. When millennials complain that they will never own a home, they're often criticized for their spending habits. We have heard the sentiment from Australian politicians critiquing us for spending our money on avocado toast and flat whites. The book Generation Rent breaks down that in 1957 to the late 1980s, the average New Zealand house price was between 2 to 3 times the price of the average annual household income. By the late 90s, the price had risen to 4 times the average household income. By 2008, we peaked at 6.5 times the average household income. This has continued to rise. This is intergenerational theft. It's propagated by the idea that a free market will regulate itself, but this isn't true. Renters and homebuyers are consumers, and landlords and real estate agents are the producers monopolizing on the small market we have to support our population. Without a capital gains tax to take from the inflated cost of houses that goes to the producers of this economy, that money could be injected into our housing. But when we have politicians with the National Party, for instance, who was in government for 9 years, who owned on average 3.43 houses amongst them, these are the MPs who are regulating our housing systems in this country. This is the same as the oil market we have in New Zealand as well. In New Zealand, our oil is the most expensive in the OECD once we take away the tax. This is the same that goes for food. These are rights that people should have. Food, housing, yet we don't want to offer that to millennials. According to New Zealand Treasury, baby boomers had negative net saving rates in their 20s and 30s, meaning nothing was being put away. In comparison, people born between 1980 and 1989, early millennials, save upwards of 10% of their income in their mid-20s. We are saving for our futures, and you guys didn't have to work for yours. Millennials are not existing within the same markets that baby boomers did. According to William Strauss and Neil Howe, every fourth generation redefines culture, regulations, and systems in order to face a social decline. We are in the midst of a social decline. Mental illness rates are rising. Poverty is in correlation with mental illness. Millennials are that generation who need to redefine what systems we have in place. We are the ones who have to fix what baby boomers have done to us. Next time you start chastising that millennial for purchasing that $22 avocado toast, maybe you should think about why the avocado toast costs $22. That's my end.
Thanks. And now over to Barbara.
Thank you very much. You won't get music from me. What you will get is a bleat because last night actually, I was doing my totally unpaid work for Bike Auckland, changing Auckland for a future generation who are now here with us. There I was, chairing Bike Auckland's AGM, and I get a message saying from my dearly beloved David, saying, SOS, Barb, we're in a real crisis. I thought, oh, fuck that. I'll contact him in the morning. So sure enough, texting, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. David, did you need me? Can I help? Because actually David has pulled me out of a number of holes. So what can I do but contact the guy? And instantly he rings me, 6 o'clock, he's on the go. Barb, the last speaker in our debate has pulled in sick. Will you help me? And I immediately offered a whole lot of other people who could help him. That's my absolute nature. But no, he wouldn't have it. He said I had to do it. Now, there's been no explanation of the fact that I'm a complete ring-in. I've never, ever debated before, and I'm scared, absolutely scared stiff. So you've got to look after me, please. Not only that, look at it. Here I am, the bloody token woman. This is a real boomer exercise. Here are these, and I suggested a whole lot of other blokes could, join the blokes team, but no.
I'm drinking your wine for you.
I'm the complete stooge. So here we go. This is boomers. Do we feel at home with this, women? Yeah. Do we really feel it propping our men up? And we're supposed to have been so busy stealing other people's futures. Tell me about it. Not only that, so, I thought, oh shit, I was busy all day. At 5 o'clock I went to our bookshelf because it was in a library. So I looked around. What do you do? What do you find? Well, you find the Boomer's Bible. Anybody got the little red school book? This is how these devious boomers were supposed to have stolen those slick, sophisticated young women's futures. You wonder about it. So, I thought I'd just flick through it because this has ruled my life, this little book. Alistair Taylor, doing us all a favour. There we were, 1972.
Hands up anyone who's owed money by Alistair Taylor, by the way.
Anyway, so it gave us really, really important advice. My lovely friends there, I just want you to know. Things like if you want to use a diaphragm. Have you ever heard of a diaphragm? It tells you need to put it in before you have intercourse. It's a really useful little book, okay? So just remember, if ever, made to fit in the back pocket, essential. Anyway, so there we go. So what I want to hear is the story about the debt that we so-called, this generation deeply in debt. Just tell me anyone here who hasn't funded their desperate, gorgeous millennial into a house. I think we might have. Now, that might be a little bit of guilt on our part. Could be, because, they are absolutely divine, these three here. I've got to be honest. I'm really glad I'm female. I wish I could join their team, but I can't. More to the point, though, is do these three divine young women look as though they have no future? Because that's what they're telling us. They've had it stolen, And they're three desperate women with no future. False packaging. And you look at my blokes here, I dearly adore them. When I open the Herald and Simon's there doing a good job, I love them to bits, but
we're barely alive.
That's the point. Have they ever had a future? Do they look... Would you have taken them home, ladies? Would you have popped them home, picked up your little red school book? Would you have done that? I don't know. Got to think about it. Anyway, and so there we go. And Leah, whose dad funded her into our house. I mean, holy hell, that's what... We're the sandwich generation, aren't we? We were so busy supporting our oldies, looking after the young ones. And now, have you seen the huge amount of migration that occurs in Devonport every morning? Have you seen that big shift of people rushing down to the ferry, running across to town. And then there's people there dropping their kids. This is the millennials dropping their kids with the grandparents for the day, who then pick them up and bring them home to Devonport for the day, day after day. These are the same people, I tell you, who's stolen these people's future. I'm sorry. So we heard about selfless from these millennials. What's not more selfless than these fantastic grandparents here in Devonport, raising the next generation? And the other thing we've got to think about is that if we are so mean and grabby and really ruthless, why are these people giving us their grandchildren to raise? I mean, there's a lot about these stories that just doesn't make sense to me. What I say to you is that we have created another generation. We've learnt them to seriously lean on us, and we are supporting them through. There might be a little bit of guilt on our part. Could be, true. But we're just paying our way, as always, all the way. So our baby boomer generation, I think they're strong. They're wonderfully reliable people. They're supporting up the generation above, the generation below these desperate, futureless people over here. I personally think there's just no argument, absolutely no argument. We didn't steal anybody's future. Not at all. They owe us one, I reckon.
And now we have the right to reply from each team, and David to sum up his team's case.
So, what have we learned? Let me first say, and let me also apologise at the same time to Barb, that Barb is a wonderful person to step into the breach at the last minute. Margot McRae said to me just last night, Margot, hello, thank you, Margot. Barb could talk under wet concrete. And so it proves to be. She also said she's my good mate. Barb can always be relied upon, and it was a revelation to me, though, to hear that she can talk from under wet concrete, because, Barb, you will know that my great passion, my abiding passion, even though I've gone and stood for you and sung Happy Birthday to the Harbour Bridge on its 50th and got people to storm the bridge on your behest, the thing that I really want is a travelator, an underwater travelator from here to over there, and wet concrete. Now that I know you can speak under wet concrete, I just know I'm going to get my travelator, and Jesus, that just cheers me the fuck up. Anyway, the mood was... There you go, Paul. Bringing it back. That the baby boomers have stolen our future, and my contention was that they nearly did. And then I thought, after I heard my esteemed friend Simon explain it to us, that actually they didn't nearly steal it, they were a long way from it. The warm smell of colitis just rose up through the air and made us all feel better about the contribution that our whole generation made. And I say that as a boomer who was only just on the cusp of it. In the summer of love, I was 7 and I had none of it. But I know... My very accurate daughter points out I was 9. Nonetheless, I had none of it, and I do rue that. And the reason I speak with such jaundice about those Muldoon years is because that's where I came to university and then went out to look for a living and realised there was none. And that's how I ended up in advertising and then in the brewery business and the Brierley business and at a Deb ball when I should have been paying attention so that I didn't know. When I got into hospital, that it wouldn't cost me $4,000 or $40,000. But I digress again. The point is that the baby boomers seized the opportunity because they had felt denied for so long, and they kind of screwed it. We screwed it, and then Ruth Richardson came along and Jenny Shipley came along and screwed it with maximum prejudice, and we've advanced ourselves hurtling headlong further into the neoliberalist abyss But in the nick of time, we have pulled back. Our boomer generation, which was never of one sentiment, one ideology, one philosophy, cannot be blamed for where we find ourselves now. We are, at this point, finding a way, just in the nick of time, to make it tenable for these people who, as Barb absolutely correctly points out, we have also taken much care of. Leah, I salute your family for their support. I salute you for your own support. Mary-Margaret, I'll see you later. Laura, kudos to you for coming halfway around the world to explore the possibilities.
I was born here.
God damn. Kudos to your Norwegian forebears for forging across the prairies in their wagons in the 19th century. Have I got that right? There we go. And then up into Alberta. See, I was listening even while I was listening, drinking all that rosé. All that rosé. And here we find ourselves at a pass where we recognise we are all the same people, really. We are beset by the problems of people who are wrong-headed, and mostly I mean Matthew Hooton. But we are also wonderful people. And by that I mean my very dear friend Barb, and my very dear friend Simon. And I just want to demonstrate how life is complex in so many ways, because I've just introduced you to two of my dearest friends, and I was reminded just this morning talking to Barbara that she rang me about, 10 years ago. Was it 100? I'm so old. One morning at about 7 o'clock actually, and she wanted to berate me because I was just a columnist for $300 a month for Metro magazine, she wanted to upbraid me for the way the Metro magazine had failed to articulate the public transport vision that matters so much to us all, and about bikes, and about everything that matters. And I had to take the device from my ear and put it over here, where I could hear Barb as clearly as you can hear her anytime you want, because she can talk under concrete. Wetter concrete. And she berated me about the state of Metro, and I was thinking, this should be Simon's call. Simon should be hearing this. But my point is, and I do apologise for taking so long to get to it, we are, as boomers, people who all hang together in the end. The warm smell of colitis has risen up through the air and always bound us together in the end, in a way that has sometimes been a thriller, but is mostly a peaceful, easy feeling. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Father, daughter. Last word.
It'll be the other way around in some few years soon. I don't know if any of you know the song Culture by the Knobs. Clearly not a lot don't, so you're not that proud of your music, because I know it. And it's about, it was young people in the Muldoon era who were bored and angry, and I don't blame any of you for that. In fact, I understand it because it would have been fucking boring. But you have known since 1990 that this needed fixing. But here we are. I would also like to say that you said millennials haven't made good music, but you're in Devonport. Lord was from here. The boomers may not have stolen our future, but they did ruin it. But it's okay, because there's nothing that millennials can't fix.
Well, look, on that optimistic note, and a very optimistic one I might say it is, got to put it to you, as an audience, which way do you call it? I'm going to give you the choice. Your acclamation for that the baby boomers have stolen our future, I'll put to you, or not. Okay, how many of you agree that the baby boomers have stolen our future? And how many of you believe that the baby boomers have not stolen our future? one didn't carry the case. They just had more time to think about it and therefore to sustain their noise a bit longer. So I call it a totally irrelevant draw. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask Dennis Oldham, one of our most esteemed members, to make presentation to the debaters, assisted by Ian Free.
Right. Well, I don't know, I'm totally confused. But the main thing is they've given us a splendid evening and we're incredibly grateful to them all. And David Slack family is something to be proud of, I think. Anyway, thanks to Devonport Chocolates, we can actually give you a small something. So Barbara, it gives me great pleasure to present it to Barbara. Barbara served for years on the Library Associates Committee, and she has done a huge amount for Devonport, and of course for bicycling. I have unfortunately had to give up bicycling. Mr. Wilson, thank you very much. And David. Thank you, Dennis. And you're superb. Thank you. Mary-Margaret. And Leah. And Laura. Laura.
Thank you.
And thank you all. Thank you for coming. Mix and mingle, have a drink, and come back to our next one, next month. Thank you all.